Hi, my name is Sandy Hyslop and I am Master Blender for Ballantines. This year is my 20th year being Master Blender, looking after the quality and continuity of all the Ballantines family of whiskies. Over my 40 years in the industry, I have been an avid collector of artefacts related to Scotch whisky and to Ballantines. I have brought some of my interesting items from my collection to share with you today. So, let's have a look. George Ballantine and Son, our founder, was renowned throughout Scotland for having a very high-class wine and spirit merchant covering all sorts of products, and first opened his first shop in Edinburgh and very soon afterwards opened another shop in Glasgow, which was very unusual at the time to have two high-class grocer stores on both the east and west coast of Scotland. This artefact here was an incredibly lucky find that I found on an online auction. This is an original 1936 catalogue of everything that you could purchase from George Ballantine and Son, and covers all the products from whisky to wine to port to champagne. It's an amazing record of all the different products, the high-class products that Ballantines were producing back at that time. And there are some great photographs inside of the original Ballantines expressions at that time. A really lucky find. So now we have something that's a bit of fun. This is an original Ballantines Night decanter that was only available in America in the 1970s and had a special Ballantines 14-year-old blend made for the series. The series came with a few different decanters, of one with a fisherman, one with a zebra, one with a duck, but the Night is my absolute favourite of this Ballantines collection. A real rare find because I have seen them for sale before, but 9 times out of 10 they're damaged. This one is absolutely perfect. I am always scouring online looking for old packs of Ballantines, old bottles with the labels. I love the history of the Ballantines brand and the way it dates all the way back to 1910 for Ballantines Finest, and how the packaging has evolved fascinates me. And I have some examples here of some of the old packaging, and here we have the Ballantines right up to date, the most modern packaging. And the packaging has evolved over the years, but it's still instantly recognisable as Ballantines, with the crest and Ballantines Finest. The shape, that shape of the bottle is iconic, and for me it doesn't matter which angle that bottle is at, you always know instinctively that it's Ballantines whisky. It's almost become their trademark, the brown book-shaped bottle. Of all the hundreds of items that I have in my whisky collection, this Ballantine safe is my absolute favourite item. I coveted this safe for many years when it sat in one of our international brand ambassador's offices. He used it on promotional activity, and the idea was that if you cracked the code on the safe, you won a bottle of Ballantines. This is something that is very, very special to me because when he retired, he gifted it to me, and it's sat in my office ever since. So what do you put in a Ballantine safe? Well, obviously you put Ballantines that is very, very precious. So I have filled the safe with Ballantines 17-year-old, 21-year-old, and even 30-year-old. At Ballantines, we are incredibly privileged to have won many awards over the years. These awards are very special because these competitions are judged blind and are a real testament to the quality that myself and my team are striving to achieve all the time. Ballantine's 17-year-old has won one of the most awards over the years, and Ballantine's 30-year-old was awarded the best blended whisky in the world last year. But the trophy that is most special to me is the Master Blender of the Year award that I won. This is something that is very special for me, to be recognised as someone who is managing the quality and making great whiskies with my team here at Ballantine's. Glenburgie single malt whisky is incredibly important in every single expression of the Ballantine's family of whisky. It brings that real sweet, fruity, homemade jam flavour to the blend and is incredibly important in every single formula. In my collection, I don't have many Glenburgie items because there are not many in existence, but the one I do have is particularly special. This large glass dispenser that probably would have sat in a bar, at the back of a bar, for dispensing Glenburgie would have been produced around 1910, and I do not know of another one in existence. A really special item in my collection. Something else that I like to collect and look out for are old whisky hydrometers. These hydrometers were used back in the day to check the strength of Scotch whisky. The brass hydrometer would have different weights and be dropped into the whisky, and from the gauge you could work out on a set of tables exactly the strength. Nowadays we use electronic equipment to measure it accurately and easily, but when I started in the industry 40 years ago, this is exactly the thing that we used to check the strength of the whisky prior to reduction for bottling, or check the cask strength single malts with these hydrometers. One very historic item in my collection is this menu from 1903, when King Edward VII visited Glasgow and they had a lunch in the city chambers. All the spirits that were supplied, and wines, champagne, were all supplied by George Ballantine, our founder at Ballantine's. His grocer's shop was seen as a very, very high class establishment, and all the spirits were the obvious choice to supply such an important visit from King Edward VII. This menu was given to me by the legendary master blender Jack Gowdy. This decanter of Ballantine's 17-year-old was given to me on a trip to Tokyo in Japan, and it's a very, very limited run decanter that was made by the team out in Japan to help promote Ballantine's 17-year-old. Ballantine's 17-year-old has an amazing reputation, particularly in Japan. It is seen as the benchmark for luxury Scotch whisky. In my collection, I have lots of different whisky books, but the most important book in my collection is The Manufacture of Whisky and Plain Spirit by John Nettleton. This copy here is an original 1913 edition, and it's jam-packed full of information, diagrams, old adverts for companies that worked with whisky. It's an amazing insight into the Scotch whisky industry at the start of last century, and is still relevant today. And I see myself on the odd occasion going back to the book and looking back through some of the information on distillation and how the whisky flavour is formed and how the process works. There are many, many advancements in how we manage the distillation process at our malt distilleries, but still this book has some amazing and relevant information. Anybody who knows me well or follows me on Instagram will know that I just love watches and timepieces. I have a very varied collection of watches and love posting Watch and Scotch on my Whisky Blender Dude account every single week. Time is so important when making Scotch whisky. Ballantine's 17-year-old has been matured for 17 years in oak casks. The flavour developing over those years and the whisky gently maturing with an evaporation loss, the angel share every year. So the whisky is incredibly precious. But the most precious whisky in the Ballantine's range is the Ballantine's 40 years old. 4 decades maturing in cask. This whisky is only produced as 108 bottles a year, hand prepared here in the blending room by myself and my team. So the watches that I brought today, the Ballantine's branded watches, if I was doing an Instagram post for this, I would absolutely go for this little Ballantine's gold bar clock, which pairs absolutely perfectly with the Ballantine's 40-year-old liquid gold. In all the items that I have in my collection relating to whisky and Ballantine's, this Ballantine's crystal decanter is a very important piece. This is from the 1930s and has never been opened. Today is the first time we've taken it out the packaging. And it's amazing to think that back in the 1930s, Ballantine's was laying stock down 30 years in advance of that. So in the 1900s, there was whisky being filled into cask that 30 years later in the 1930s we'd be able to produce this very high age, which was very unusual to have a whisky at such elevated age back in the 1930s. Let's roll forward 90 years. And here we have still the Ballantine's 30-year-old. We're still laying stock down for over 3 decades to make this amazing, luxurious, fruity, sweet, tropical notes whisky. Ballantine's 30-year-old is an absolute classic in the portfolio. This time, from my archive, we have an old vintage photograph of Jack Gowdy, the legendary master blender for Ballantine's. This picture hangs on my wall in my office next to the blending room here at Dumbarton and features Jack nosing samples in the original blending room at Dumbarton Distillery down in the centre of the town. Jack was my mentor when I was learning all about Ballantine's. He also was a very firm but kind person. When I started working with him, I made the long journey down from the east coast of Scotland down to Dumbarton to Glasgow for the first time living on my own, and he was particularly good at making sure if I was all right and if everything was going okay for me. He was really good at learning me the ropes of blending and the differentiation of flavours, but also he could be a very hard taskmaster. He was my mentor and tormentor all rolled into one. In my collection of whisky-related items, I have a massive collection of whisky miniatures. These Ballantine's miniatures are lovely and a great snapshot in time. The one at the front here is a very early example of a Ballantine's flagon produced probably in the 1930s and has amazing script and writing and shows the crest as it is today. So it's wonderful to have that link to the past. Some of the other miniatures are very special as well. The Ballantine's 21-year-old full-size bottle was first produced in the 1990s, and these little Ballantine's 21-year-old miniatures were actually never produced. These were prototypes that I managed to acquire from the packaging development team. So these are very special for me because there are very few of them in existence. Another one of my collections that I have accumulated over the years are miniature stills, and I'm always on the lookout when I'm travelling about for different little miniature stills. Some of them are paperweights, some of them are hip flasks, and the rarer ones are original adverts for the companies who made the stills for the whisky distillers back in the 1930s and 40s. These are particularly hard to find. In a distillery, the still is incredibly important in shaping the flavour of the whisky. In Glenburgie, our stills help produce that real sweet strawberry, homemade strawberry jam flavour that we're looking for as one of the most essential ingredients in Ballantine's whiskies. So here we have a small selection of all the quaichs that I have accumulated over the years. A quaich is a traditional Scottish drinking vessel. All these quaichs I've acquired from dinners and presentations, and they're really fascinating for me because some of them are engraved and are great memories of places I've visited, places I've been. They're great fun. Now, a quaich has two handles, and you pour whisky into the quaich. Now, specifically, legend would have it that it has two handles because many, many years ago, with all the Scottish clans, they were terrible for fighting with each other. So if you have two hands on the quaich, you're not able to get up to any mischief or cause any trouble with your fellow, and all you're doing is cheersing. Slanjava. This old book is a fascinating history of Ballantine's 17-year-old. It covers the history of Ballantine's, how we make Ballantine's 17-year-old, and features some of the people who helped shape the flavour, shape the whisky over the years. And in the book is a cracking picture of myself, Jack and Robert. Back in the early days, I was the only master blender who's worked with two previous master blenders at the one time, so you could probably say I had a double apprenticeship. For me, collecting items associated with Scotch whisky and Ballantine's is a serious thing, going and looking for things, but it's not all serious. These little decanters from the 1950s are really good fun and depict comical characters and have Scotch whisky on them and always raise a smile. It's always a real bonus when I find one when I'm out and about trawling the antique fairs looking for Scotch whisky items. These are a little bit of fun and always raise a smile. When collecting items related to Scotch whisky production or Ballantine's, there are many different facets to my collection. And I love the old scientific instruments that you get for checking how much is in a cask. There are dipsticks that would have been used by the distillery manager, or maybe even by customs and excise when they were carrying out checks on the distillery to make sure there was no skullduggery going on with the spirit. These little things build up a great collection of the history of things that were going on at the distillery at the time. In my collection, there is no end to the variety, and you can also go to the other end of the spectrum and this huge slide rule that would have been used for working out all the different contents of a sherry butt or of an American oak barrel or a hogshead. So these were essential instruments for someone working in the distillery or working in the inventory department, working out the amount of stock that you have available at an age to blend together to make the Ballantine's blend. When I'm collecting items related to Ballantine's, not everything fits on a shelf or in a drawer. And these two items certainly fall into that category. This is a fabulous 1950s glass display bottle that would have sat in the window of a shop at one time. And as a real survivor, I've never seen another one. You can see compared to the 70cl bottle, this is a bit of a beast. And then we have the display cask from around the same time, probably the 1950s, and has been like a cask that might have been used in a bar for dispensing whisky, and has been beautifully hand sign written with Ballantine's on it. Another very rare survivor and fabulous addition to the collection. Well, I hope you've enjoyed a little insight into my ever-expanding collection of whisky and Ballantine's memorabilia. It's been an absolute pleasure to share all these bits and pieces that I have accumulated over 40 years of working in the industry and 20 years of having the amazing responsibility of being master blender for Ballantine's. So I'm going to finish with a glass of Ballantine's finest. Now, if you have any old Ballantines or whisky artefacts, why don't you send me a photograph to my Instagram account, Whisky Blender Dude? I would love to see what people have in their collections that I don't have already. Slanjavar.